more of Leo Club of Wickramasinghepura. Social media has become a part of our day-to-day life, and we need to ensure that these platforms can be freely used without any fear. In the recent past, bullying and harassments experienced by the users of social media have been significantly increased. Have you ever been a victim and thought that the only thing you could do is staying silent instead of taking any action against it? Well, staying silent will not provide us any solution. Joining us today is an expert in handling social media related issues to tell us about cyberbullying and how we can take measures against it. I warmly welcome our guest speaker, Mr. Deena Dayalan Nagaratnam from Sri Lanka Computer Emergency Readiness Team. Mr. Dayalan has 6 years of experience with Sri Lanka CERT and is currently working as an information security engineer at Sri Lanka CERT. So I now invite Mr. Dayalan to conduct the webinar. Mr. Dayalan,
Right,
over to you.
Thank you so much for the introduction, and I hope everyone can hear me well. Right,
We can hear you, sir.
Share my screen. I'm not using my headphones since I'm not having a bit of discomfort, but then if you feel that my voice is not clear, you can feel free to let me know. Let me see what I can do. Right, so my name is Dayalan and I'm attached to Sri Lanka CERT, and certainly I'll give you a little bit of introduction about CERT. So we're going to be talking on the topic of cyberbullying. I know this is very much spoken in today's world, and some of us have experienced being bullied, and some of us have heard this from our friends. So before I start with my session, I would like to pose out a question to you guys, right? If you know the answer, you can put it on the chat, or you can unmute and tell me the answer. So what are the two most important factors to bear while using internet? Because we are connected, and a night without internet or Instagram or Facebook has become so much of difficult to us, right? And we've seen that even recently when Facebook was down for nearly 6 hours, and we've seen the struggles what people had to go through, right? But do any of you know what are the two most important factors? Let me see if I have any answers on the chat. Right, you can message, right? That's fine. I don't see any answer. That's fine, right? But I want you to think about this as we go along, right? So before we start with the topic, I want to give you a quick introduction about Sri Lanka, sir. Not just because I work for here, but you need to understand being citizens of Sri Lanka, because Sri Lanka CERT's constituents are the private sector, public sector, and the general public. So it's important you understand what we do. So I'm going to give you very short, I'm not going to tell you much about it. So we are a government agency, though we go as a private limited company. We are a government mandated agency which operates under the Ministry of Technology at present. So we kind of involved with proactive and reactive measures against cyber threats. When I say proactive, I mean the things that we do before something could happen. So awareness is something that we do, right? Because awareness is, if people aren't aware of cyber threats, then it becomes an issue. So we send alerts, we conduct awareness sessions, we have articles written on our websites. There's so many things that we do as part of proactive. And also reactive, it's about when an incident happens, when something happens which is affected in terms of confidentiality, integrity, or availability, we call it CIA triad. We try and help the organization in terms of rebuilding or trying to get to that pre-incident state, right? So these are things that we do, and people always misunderstand, thinking that we are a law enforcement authority. We aren't. The only law enforcement authority in Sri Lanka is Sri Lankan police, right? And so we are indeed connected with global networks as other organizations such as APCert, First and Camp, and many more, right? I'm not going to take much time in explaining them. But if you look at our main services, I would like to spend a minute or so just to give you a little bit more information. So responsive service, for example, again, this is incident handling. When an incident is being identified or detected, and when it's reported to Sri Lanka CERT, we certainly support. When I say an incident, it's to do with a security incident, not when someone's computer is not working due to any other reasons. But if it's to do with related to security, we certainly support. We have been supporting the government organizations and also general public who have been in touch with us. So, and also we try and send alerts, threat intelligence information to government organizations and also private organizations. So we get alerts and information from different entities that we are working with. So as we receive them, we try and disseminate them through ISPs to our general public. Then the second thing that we do is awareness. Awareness is key for any organization, especially you need to make people understand what is the importance of security. Without doing awareness, people aren't being going to aware of awareness. So awareness is key. And sorry, let me make this. Yes. So we have something called Cybersecurity Week, which we do every year, and this year we have it as well towards the end of this month. So if you're interested in being part of Hacking Challenge or free workshop, please be connected, and we will have all this information on our Sri Lanka CERT website. So when it comes to consultancy, we help organizations in building their resilience. So for example, let's say that they have an infrastructure. So we try and help them finding out the vulnerabilities in the infrastructure, and then so that they can rectify them. We help them to rectify and also solve them so that their environment does not become vulnerable, right? So we do this with various organizations, and we have a research and development team who look into who works towards our strategy, and we have a strategy in place, a national strategy, which is uh, building up the national cyber resilience, and which is in place. So this is just a snapshot of Sri Lanka CERT, and I do want like to talk a little bit about incident, because cyber bullying leads to cyber incidents. If you look at the stats, in 2019 November, we had nearly 3,560 incidents, the total number of incidents that has been reported. But I'm not going to be going through all this. But if you look at social media, the most 2,600. But if you look at 2020, and we've seen the pandemic, and we know that from 2019 to 20, most of us have been at home, working from home, and we've experienced a pandemic. So if you look at the incidence has risen from nearly 4,000 to 16,000. That it has gone up by 4 times, and you might wonder why. Simply purely because um, we don't look into our safety when we are online. We don't look into privacy. We don't think about our safety issues, and this is the reasons why these issues have increased, especially on social media. If you look at the stats, right. So, and as I speak about these stats, I would like to highlight a few things where our general public fall into. One thing is phishing. If you see, number of phishing attacks is 17, and here 5, right? Now, phishing, the reason I say that is this is one of the reasons why how your privacy gets violated, your security gets violated. As a result, the attacker or the bad guy, they gain access to information. I'm sorry. They gain access to your information, right? And they start blackmailing you. Now, phishing is basically an attacker trying to gather your username and password. You might wonder why someone needs a username and password. Simply because if someone manages to get your username and password of any accounts, it can be Gmail, it can be Yahoo, it can be Facebook, doesn't matter what, they can get to know what you've been doing, who you've been talking to, what sort of conversation has been going on, what sort of transaction you've been doing. They understand a holistic view, right? And this violates, this brings issues in terms of your privacy, because someone else gets to know what you've been doing, and if they bring that to public, certainly it becomes an issue. So phishing is a technique that's used by the attacker trying to gather your user credentials, your username and passwords. So People are trapped into this, especially when you receive a link. Sometimes you might receive a link through your social media. Maybe your good friend had sent you a link saying that, hey Machan, did you see this, we have been tagged on a video. So thinking that it comes from your friend, you might click on it and it might just take you to another page which would just look like a Facebook if you look at this. But if you look at the URL here, it's completely different, right? So we don't tend to look at the URL. We're looking at the site, we just put our credential thinking that okay, probably it's requiring username and password. When we put that, this information gets stored in a remote location where the attacker has access to, and when you enter, it redirects you to the original site. And you might wonder what has happened, but the truth is that you have been redirected from a fake site to the original site, and the credential that you entered has been taken by the attacker, and the attacker quickly changes this information. And then when you put your credentials into the new site that you've been redirected to, you will no longer have access, right? So people have been affected by this, so you need to be cautious and be careful, especially clicking on links, because sometimes the links come from your friend. That's purely because your friend's account has been compromised and you think it's your friend. No, it's not your friend. So you need to be cautious when clicking on unknown links, because some of these links can lead to malware getting downloaded onto your computer, or it could be a ransomware where data can get encrypted. The second thing is this: you might also receive our emails. For example, someone might send you a link. Okay, look at this. It says Uber Eats instructions. If you don't retain your account within this certain amount of time, your account gets blocked or will no longer be in use. So you might receive a lot of things. So looking at, you cannot figure it out from and to. You cannot say actually it has come from this particular person. You'll have to do something called header analysis. Well, that's too technical, but what's important you to understand is, do not click on links that you receive and change credentials. If you want to change credentials, or when you receive such emails, if you want to, and if you've actually changed your credentials recently, you can Google it up and then go to that particular link and change information. The second thing is scam, and this is one of the reasons how people fall into this cyberbullying, right? The reason I say that is we've seen a lot of things that goes on the internet, and this is just to, attackers try to target people in different ways, on social medias, on Gmails, through Google Drive links. We're going to look at that, right? They just make you believe, they deceive you with messages, and you fall into it, okay, thinking that okay, well, I've got this saying that I got to pay around $10, and I've been a lucky winner and I've been chosen for a green card entry for US. And you might think $10 is nothing. I make around 300,000 a month, so $10 is around 2,000 rupees. I would rather pay that $10 to try my chance in getting a lotto to US, right? But just imagine if hundred thousands of people do that, the attacker gets 100,000 into $10, so he becomes a millionaire overnight, right? So without applying for a lotto, how will you receive, right? If you look at American green card lotto, it's a true thing, right? There is actually a program as such, but what's important is you will not receive something without applying. So you need to be cautious, you need to use your common sense, right? Looking at the COVID-19 scams, and this is one of the reasons why it has led to a lot of cyberbullying. There has been a lot of information harvesting. There's a lot of links being shared online, especially government staffs were targeted, and they were asked for information, and some of them have given without verifying information. That's one. Second thing, that students and general public were targeted of fake loans. We've seen people have been struggling, especially people who've been depending on their daily wages and who are contractors. So attackers have been smart, trying to target them on social media, saying that we are from loan company, we are providing loans, and they get you into a conversation. And then the interesting fact is that they say that in order for us to give you the loan, you'll have to pay us so much. Now, if someone is giving you a loan, why would you have to pay a big amount of money, right? Again, common sense, but people still fall into this thinking because everything looks genuine. They send you the documents, they get in touch with you, they give you all instructions, everything looks professional, and you will not able to differentiate. So yes, when you're not much literate, you will not be able to understand much, so you fall into this. As a result, you start losing the funds that you have as well. Then we've seen a lot of drive links being shared on Facebook and some other platforms, saying that laptops are issued for students, and we've seen a lot of people putting their information. Now, why would a government entity would share a Google Drive link saying that they are providing laptops, right? Again, common sense, something we need to think. And we've not seen a lot of fake grocery sites where it looks very legitimate. You go, you can choose products, you can go into a payment card and you can make the payments, and everything goes through, but you don't get your orders because purely these are fake sites. And we've seen free data scams. Again, random people have been trying to put things, and they've been trying to get information about people, so they can use all this information to bully or for different aspects. Now let's get into the main topic. We need to understand what cyberbullying is. Generally, we know what's a bully in our physical world. So the only factor is that you get bullied using these technologies. People approach you using devices connected to the internet. That is why we call it cyberbullying, because you're bullied on the internet. Simple as that. Now, why? Sometimes people, your photos. Sometimes we don't actually think before we share certain things on our social media. We just share it. So when there are people, if you just go onto certain people's Facebook page, everything is public. So from what they've done from morning to evening is listed, right? Again, well, I'm not saying it's wrong or right, but if that's seen by a bad guy or a bad person, actually they might even try and trace down where you live, or try and get to the place where you are, or they might even plan on something. So it's important who we share information with. And also they try to threaten you via messages, all right, and then sometimes impersonate you by sending messages to someone else. And we've seen, and I would like to share some statistics how it has affected people as well. But what affects generally people is mentally, emotionally, and physically, right? These are some of the factors that really affects people, right? Because we've seen when people are being affected with cyberbullying, right? We've seen that they get mentally affected, they become very emotional, right? And we've seen the difference in them, especially when your friends, if you've had any of your friends being affected, you might have seen, right? They might lose interest in certain things, right? And then sometimes they're very tired, for little things they say tired, they say they have aches, body aches, and all that. So these are effects, but we don't realize in long term that leads to. But another thing that I've commonly seen is that we always blame. We always say, okay, why did you do this? Why did you share this? You know that if you share this photo, someone would take it on. So why did you do this? One thing that we need to remember is that not everyone knows about this, right? Not everyone knows that the world is cruel. And also not everyone knows that when you share this, that this can be misused. Now I can tell you a quick story. I gave a tablet to my father for him to talk to me on WhatsApp, and he's not literate, and he does not know how to manage technologies. So I clearly told, okay, my wife explained to my father, and this is how he should be using. And after a few days, I see him on Facebook, and it's like, I said, what now? He's got 20 or 30 odd friends, and I was like, what? I called him, and well, actually, it wasn't a very pleasant call. But then I asked him why and all that, and he said, no, I had a problem, and then I gave it to the next door guy who comes into the shop. And this boy has created that. My father doesn't even know that he was existing on Facebook. Right. So it's important. Sometimes if you do not know the technology, don't use it. It's good to learn about it, but without knowing, and if you have a profile, that can be misused. Someone can take that as a joke and start, impersonating you or sharing unnecessary messages. But what's important is, do not blame the victim. Do not shout at them. Do not be harsh on them. You got to see how you can help them. That's more important, right? And there are a few terms related to cyberbullying, so I'd like to focus on this. You might have heard of them and you may not, but let's look at them. Voyeurism, right? Voyeurism, it's an act where it's watching at people maybe undressing or look people being part of a sexual act, but without their consent, without their knowledge, obviously. But you watch them. That's called voyeurism. Doxing, it's about private information about a particular individual is being shared with malicious content on the internet, that we call doxing. And revenge porn, you guys might have heard, and this is distributing sexually exploited images and videos of individuals without their consent to someone else. And we've seen this quite a lot, especially when people have been in relationships, especially when someone has sent certain photos to someone else, especially when relationships do break up, and we've seen people doing this, right? So let's look at a few things. Now, according to CID in 2018, 90% of university students have been victim of cyber harassment, and 80% of them is through social media, and it's to do with Facebook, right? I know this is staggering, but look at the below one. 1 in every 4 individuals know that a friend who had experienced online harassment, right? So this is according to Women in Need. And also, in 1 in 5 individuals know that someone who had edited images of them had been shared on the internet, right, with intimidated photos. And also, if you look at the reporting, the highest reporting of incidents where these intimate images or videos have been shared throughout our country, probably we're looking at Colombo, Kandy, or Gaul, but actually it's been in Batiklo, 63.9%, and in followed by Badulla, right? And okay, now you might wonder, what is an acts? How do we come out of this? Okay, certainly we have certain acts in Sri Lanka, especially the Computer Crime Act number 24 2007, Electronic Transaction Act, Payment Device Protection Act, and Intellectual Property. But our concern here is Computer Crime Act number 24, and to be honest, it's not sufficient. Okay, we do not have specialized things to cover in terms of privacy, and this is where our drawback in terms of our law. And it states it was written down in 2007, and when we see the difference between 2007 and 2021, there has been so much of changes, so it's important that these things get updated. So we always rely on a penal code. There's a penal code act. Penal code enacts the criminal and penal law of Sri Lanka. So this is the act that we can benefit ourselves from as we face this cyberbullying. So one thing is that, so let's look at this section 396. So defines cheating as whoever or deceives any person fraudulently or dishonestly to deliver any property, or can be used to cover an action of the perpetrator using the phone of victim's boyfriend, pretending to be to obtain compromised images of the victim, right? So it clearly states, right? So let's say that in the victim, look at the next one. In the event that a victim is asked to provide any property or valuable security or anything signed or sealed in exchange for preventing such image or videos being published, we call this extortion, right? So you can be charged under penal code section 373. So there are provisions available under penal code. That's something we need to understand. We always keep complaining, right? The laws are not, yes, certainly we don't have specialized laws, but we have adequate things where someone can be taken into custody. And look at this. So let's say that if you don't get involved with certain act, I will be publishing this information on the internet. So if that is so, yes, there is a provision 438 and also section 363, and certainly the other person is accountable, right? And there's few other things with penal code. I'm not going to be going through all this, but what's important is you're not alone, right? So if you are being bullied, it's important that you get this across to someone. We'll be looking at that. But there are laws. There's penal code law in Sri Lanka where you can take someone accountable, right? So what do we do when we are bullied? So it's important, we need to know what solutions do we have. One thing is that we need to look at the platforms that we use. It can be Facebook, Instagram, It could be anything. We need to try and see, sorry, we need to try and see what are the options available, right? When we are bullied, because these platforms have provided with certain provisions, something we need to understand. And the second thing is that if that goes beyond that control, we need to try and reach out to people. We need to speak to someone, right? If you're a child under 18, you can speak to NCPA, right? They've got a law enforcement authority. They've got the law enforcement officers at their places. So by speaking to them, you can certainly get some support. You can definitely contact Sri Lankan police, since they are the only law enforcement authority who can support you. Now, CID Cybercrime, they have a special unit for social media. So I think it's there. You can get in touch with them. And also through Tell IGP online, through email addresses, you can get in touch. What's more important is you get in touch with someone, but it's important you get to someone who's trustworthy. Because again, if you go to someone unknown and if you fall into the trap again, and that person may start using you again. So it's important the person who you reach out. And certainly there are other organizations such as NGOs, Women in and Women and Child Bureau, government institution, who you can always speak and get support of, right? So you're not alone, remember that. And most of us have experienced this, and this is not something new, and all of us go through one or the other way, right? So don't keep it to yourself, don't hold it onto yourself. If you see someone facing this, you got to help them, you got to speak to them, right? And you remember I did post out a question right at the beginning, right? So what are the two most important factors to bear while using internet? Anyone has the answer for this? So what are the two things we look into? Anyone would like to take a chance? So let's say I'm trying to create some accounts online or trying to do something. What are the two things that I need to look into to safeguard myself? Right, one thing is privacy. We forget about our privacy because we forget that when people get to know more and more about ourselves, right, we have less privacy, but we forget to understand that. And we've seen where people sharing so much of information publicly, exposing things that they should not be exposing to people who they don't know, right? And we've heard a lot of stories, and we've seen in reality and how people have been affected. So privacy is something that you need to focus on, especially when you're on the internet. It doesn't matter if it's a Facebook account or Gmail account or Instagram. You got to read out privacy settings and see what's best for you and apply them. We forget them because our interest is about creating an account. So as a result, we forget, and then people start tagging you, people start posting photos. There's so much of controls which is in place. If you take Facebook, you have almost all provisions to have privacy in terms of to limit what someone can share about you on the internet, right? So it's in your hands, and it's in your hands how you want to have them. So it's important that you apply privacy regardless of what you do on the internet. It can be a browser, it can be an app. Look into privacy and make sure that correct principles are applied. Second thing is security. Now, security is also fundamental. Now, when I say security, it's about how you protect your account. So generally, how do we protect? It's through passwords, right? So we always hear people saying use a strong password. Now, if I may ask you, how many of you using different passwords for different accounts? I'm sure most of you be saying to yourself, no, we use the same password, right? And it practically becomes difficult to remember different passwords for different accounts. So the best thing is to use something called passphrase. So that makes it easier. So all what you have to do is come up with a phrase that's easy to remember, and then you create a pattern so that you don't have to write them down. By just knowing your phrase, it becomes easy for you to have different passwords for different accounts. I've just given you an example here just for you to understand. Let's say that I come up with a phrase called Don is great, right? So if I want, I can say Don is at Facebook at great, and I can put also a number end. So likewise, I can create everything. Now no one knows Don is great is my passphrase, so I have to create something which will not be guessed by someone easily. Then we have Don is great at Gmail. I've shared 3 examples here, that is just for your information, right? And now, okay, so security is something that you need to focus on. So when you don't apply them, when you don't have, for example, now all these applications have something called two-factor authentication, simple as verifying a phone number. So even if someone tries uh, guesses your password, they will not be able to gain access to your account purely because a code is sent to your phone. Now we don't realize the importance of this, but when our accounts are compromised, that is when we do, but it's too late, because at that time, by the time that this guy knows all about us. So it's important that you safeguard your information. So security and privacy, this should be the fundamentals regardless of what you do on the internet and what you connect to. Just think of these two. So by doing that, you can make sure that you can be safe, right? And this will certainly help towards prevent cyberbullying as well. Now, all these things lead to because of information, right? All this cyberbullying, cyber harassment, and all these things takes place purely because of information or your data. So it's important we understand how we safeguard our information. We call this information life cycle. Regardless of what you do, creating a Facebook account, you create one. So we call that acquisition or creating an account. We started using the Facebook account. We started putting information. And after sometimes we archive. Let's take a Word document. You create a document, a project. Okay, you get some information from somewhere, you create, you start using them, you start adding information. Sometimes, if the document purpose is fulfilled, you might archive it in another place. Or if you think, no, I don't record this anymore, we are done with this project, you might delete it. What I'm trying to convey here is that you need to think of security and privacy in every aspect of this life cycle. When you create something, you need to think of security. When you start using something, you need to think of security. When you try to archive something, yes, it's important, because if someone is able to gain access to your confidential information, your personal photos that you shared it somewhere, what's the point? And all of us are connected to Google, for example. We've seen if you're on an Android phone, right? And we've seen that our photos are synchronized. Some people don't realize that every photo that you take on your photos goes into your Google Drive. And when your Gmail account gets compromised, you don't realize that the other person has access to your photos. Sometimes we just think, it's my phone, no one has it. No, it's not. So you need to be careful. Sometimes if a phone is lost, what are we going to do, right? So my point here is that to safeguard ourselves from cyberbullying, to protect ourselves from various other things on the internet, we need to think of this information life cycle. That is creating a Facebook account, to creating a Skype account, or creating a Word document. It can be an Excel sheet, doesn't matter what. We need to think of security. As far as we think of security and privacy, we will be in safe hands. Right, finally, I would like you to tell you a few things, facts, where you can safeguard yourself to prevent from cyberbullying, because we see that this is happening through social media mainly. One thing is that let's not fall for attractive photos, because when we see a good looking guy or a girl, we fall into the trap of accepting friend request, and we fall into trouble. Then sometimes we click on links that send to us or messages. It can be a pretty girl sending us a message. We might just fall into it, but you should be cautious. You never know who the person is, because anyone tomorrow can use my photos and create an account. Doesn't mean that it's me, right? So we need to be careful. And also never share our personal information on social media. And this is one of the reasons why people start bullying you. Never share your password with anyone. Just keep that in mind. Never ever do that. And your personal information, don't do that. Let's say that you're sharing one of your personal photos to your friend through Facebook, and you know for a fact that you're in a relationship or whatever the reason, and you know that no, she won't do that, he won't do that, fine, okay. But what happens if his or her Facebook accounts get compromised. What are you going to do? We have no control of that, right? So this is what we need to be careful in terms of sharing information. You may trust the other person, you may trust B, your A and B, but the fact that if B's account is compromised, what can you do? Nothing. The photos can get leaked and they might share that, and you might never know. I mean, because we live in, our society is different, right? Our culture is different. People start judging you very quickly, right? So always make sure that site URL is correct. That's important. Do not without looking at the URL, because sometimes we receive things with URL shortener. There are different ways. If you're not sure, don't click on it. That's better, right? There are things like virus total, different ways how you can verify this URL is legit or not. There are different ways you can do that, but if you're not sure, just Google it up. Simple things. There's information. We don't seek this. Make sure we use strong passwords so that your account is safeguarded. Make sure you enable two-factor authentication, so even if someone tries to gain access, they will not be able to, because they need to have your two-factor authentication. And finally, check your URL. And you might also want to know the organization that you can get assistance from. Now, if you look at Sri Lanka CERT, this is not a function of CERT, and we've been saying this, but we've not seen any other organization in Sri Lanka who's trying to support towards support victims who have been victims of cyberbullying. But we've seen organizations coming up now. We have someone called Hitavati. Yes, they're there to support. We have NCPA. If you're under the age of 18, you can call them 1929. They're there to support you. There's Women and Child Bureau. It's a ministry. You can speak to them. There's different numbers that you can get in touch to get help. Like I said before, it's important you speak to someone and do not hold it yourself, right? Because if you give the chance to the attacker or for the guy or the girl who's bullying you, then more and more you'll be used. The more and more they know for a fact that you cannot come out of this, and they'll be using you in different ways, right? So because you made a mistake, that's fine, but you've got to come out of this. It's not the end of the world, right? So please make sure that you speak to someone who you trust, or get in touch with someone who can certainly assist you. And I think that brings to the end of my presentation. I'm happy to take some questions, if that's okay by the organizers. Thank you.
If you have any questions, please unmute your microphones and ask, or just simply type it in the chat box.
In Sri Lanka, do we have any laws on
Okay, I think you're asking about laws. Okay, sorry. Yeah, go on. Now, we have only Computer Crime Act, like I said before, right, which can help towards cyberbullying. But that does not have enough provision, to what I understand. I'm not a law, enough things that can cover. So this is where the penal code comes in handy. Through penal code, you can take someone, you can make someone accountable. The penal code, there are different sections. I have put certain things here. Through that, you can make someone accountable, right? It's not impossible, it is possible, but we don't have specialized law. That is the problem. Now, for example, now I spoke about few concepts like voyeurism, but I don't know whether this is covered in an existing law. I don't think so. This is why we need to have our laws updated, and it's understandable. This was created in 2007 and we live in 2021, and we've seen the change. Just think of the pen drive that we use today for what we had in 2007 and today. That's a vast difference, right? And we've seen the growth in the technology as well, and things are getting digitalized day by day. And So we all of us are connected with everything that we do. So yes, if to answer your question, yes, Computer Crime Act, but it's insufficient. So that's what the lawyers, they use the penal code of Sri Lanka to make someone accountable for the actions. There's a good article. I will post this here. It was written by an NGO, I think. I will share this. You can read about it. They give you more information about these laws. I'll share this in the chat if that helps anyone. Any other questions? So my point here is that please make sure that you speak to someone, don't hold on to yourself. That is one. Second thing is see what options you have on the platform that you use to take us preventive or reactive actions, and then reach out these organizations, and that's more important. And always think about privacy and security when you're on the internet. So if you can think of those two, and if you just think of that information life cycle, you'll be fine, and you will not you will not be a victim of cyber bullying or harassment.
So there's a question in the
Sorry.
chat.
Okay, right. Let me see. Okay. Is there if there are videos that harm one's identity shared over the internet, can we get help? Yes, certainly. Now what happens is that when, okay, first thing, what you have to think of a permanent solution. Let's say that your boyfriend of yours or girlfriend of yours has some videos of yours, and they're trying to blackmail you or someone else. First thing is that you got to get the help of law enforcement officers, purely because if you don't um, take these people into if you don't take it up to the police, these guys can keep doing it again and again, and they'll be like, I didn't do this, I had it, but I deleted. I don't know who did this, right? So first thing is that you have to make them accountable. Go lodge a complaint, find the right method, and make sure that, so that a statement, either a statement is taken uh, from the bad guy at the police station, so he becomes accountable. And even if you had to go to courts, you can say that this video was with him, right? So let's say that your video was posted on a gossip sites, or it can be a pornography site, or it can be any site. Yes, certainly, by getting in touch with the admin or the contact us information that I can provide. Right, okay. So by providing, so certainly by getting in touch with us, we can certainly help you. So what we do is that, let's say that it's hosted on xyz.com. We go to contact us, we get that information, and then we write on behalf of you to that company saying that this information has been posted on this site without this person's confirmation. So we kindly request you to take it off, and they immediately react because we send that through a cert email. But you can do it yourself as well. And remember one thing, once you have them on the internet, some of these things do get shared on different sites. Now let's say it's a pornography video that gets shared all over, right? So it's very difficult control of things, right? So this is where you need to be quite careful what you take, what you have in your phone, what you have on your laptop, what you have on your Facebook. You need to be, you are accountable for your action. That is all I can say, right? You need to be cautious, because once you have something and when it goes out of your control, that's it. And remember, today you may be just guys out here, who have just started your career, who just come out of university, but you never know what your future holds. You can become a politician, or you might become a musician. You never know about thinking of hidden talents. You never know what you'd become in the future. And if your information gets to come out at that point, that's going to damage your reputation. So this is why you need to be cautious, right?
Is there any questions?
I mean, feel free to ask if there's any questions. That's okay. I mean, we're here for a discussion, so it can be hypothetical, but you can still ask. Sorry, I didn't see this. Can we stop our profile pictures uploaded to social media being shown on Google pages when we search our names? Yes, certainly. There is. This is why I said privacy and security. Go and look it up. There is an option where you can prevent people from searching. It's there. Right? So that's there. So just the fact that you need to look into privacy and security, just have that as a habit, regardless of what you create. You can always go and limit what people can see. It's in your hands, because all these platforms have given you the provisions. It's just that we don't use, right? So go revisit your profile, try and see what's in privacy, what's in security. And you also have to do this at least once in a way, at least a couple of months, because things keep changing. There are new things that's been introduced to safeguard your accounts better, right? So you will have to try and make sure that you look into that. Right? It's not just with Facebook, it's not just with Instagram, but anything that you do online. It can be a browser, it can be a Skype account, it can be a Gmail. Look into privacy and security. As far as you've got your settings right, you are much safer, and this gives less chances for you to become a cyber victim. Okay, there's another question, I think. Let's say, okay, thank you.
Any more questions? It seems there's no any questions. So before we conclude this webinar, on behalf of our club, I would like to thank Mr. Deena Dalan Nagaratnam for this informative presentation on cyberbullying. It has provided us with a lot of information, which I'm sure that will be very useful for our participants. Thank you, sir, for conducting this webinar in spite of your busy schedule. Thank you very much. I also would like to thank all the participants for taking part of this webinar. With that being said, we will now conclude today's webinar. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Good night.